Okay, let's get started on the covers. Ignore these right here. We're going to trim that off. We're going to start the covers by gluing a couple of pieces together. The final cover that we're going to end up building is going to be 7 1/4 inches wide by 7 inches tall. And it's going to have a 3-inch spine, and we're going to need about 1/4 inch for the gutter on each side of the spine. And then we're going to need about 1 inch on either side to wrap around the edge. So the final piece that we need is 19.75 inches long by 9 inches tall. And because I don't have a cutting board that can cut 19 1/4 inches, I need to calculate where to glue it together and then where to cut it, because my trimmer maxes out at 12 inches. I think this is gonna work. Just doing a little math. These two pieces laid end to end are 22 inches long, and since I need 19.75, then I can have an overlap of 2 1/4 inches. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure this one to, let me get a pencil, a pen, something that'll make a light mark. It doesn't have to be this precise. And I'm going to use liquid glue because this is going to end up being wrapped around the spine. Set that aside and let that dry. It won't take very long. And now we're going to cut the chipboard. The album covers are going to be 7 1/4 inches wide by 7 inches tall. So I'm gonna line it up at 7 1/4 inches here, which is gonna be a little bit over 7 1/4 inches up here. I'm not sure why that is, but for the spine we need it 7 inches tall. And 3 inches wide. I'm going to start by centering the spine, make sure I got enough room for the covers. Yeah, that's good. start just kind of working the edges of this paper. This is 65-pound paper. It's a little easier to work than 110-pound paper. I'm going to gently work this over to try to keep the cracking to a minimum. And I'm not worried about this because we're going to glue that down. Now we're going to miter the edges, or miter the corners, and when mitering the corners, you don't want to go right up to the chipboard corner. You want to leave a gap between the edge of the chipboard and your cut that's about the width of the chipboard. And I find it easier to go in at an angle that's not quite 45 degrees. So I have not quite mastered the art of the perfect 45-degree cut. And it's a little bit easier for me to recover if I have a little too much paper than not enough. Alright, we're going to go ahead and glue this down, including right in there. See, here I cut it just a little bit too shallow, and let me see if I can get it to focus. There you can see there's a little bit of a gap. My plan for this particular album, I might be able to cover that up. For the cover, I initially thought I was going to do mixed media, but I decided not to do that because this is a gift for somebody, and she's not real big on mixed media. But there is a die cut that I want to add to this project. There's a die cut that I want to add to the corner of this project. So I need to get the cover matted first. There. Before I can add the die cut wrap around the corner. And I'm going to do this to both. So I trim this down to 7 inches by 6 3/4. And I'm going to end up gluing that piece down, and then I've got let me go ahead and trim all the pieces out. So I need to trim this down to 7 inches. 6 3/4. And this needs to be 6 and 6 3/4 by 2 3/4. This is going to be to mat the spine. 3/4. And then the actual cover pieces. This is got to be one of my favorite papers of all time. I love the colors. I love the florals. Oh, it's so beautiful. So this needs to be 6 3/4 by 6 1/2, and I'm trimming down 1/4 of an inch each time just to give an 1/8 of an inch mat all the way around. So 6 3/4 by 6 1/2. This will be the front cover. And then I'm going to use this paper, and it may not be obvious at first. This paper is definitely directional, so you want to make sure that you get it going in the right direction, because these mats are not perfectly square. If they were perfectly square, then it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But they are not, so it needs to be 6 1/2 inches top to bottom and 6 3/4 inches side to side. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut off the branding strip here so that I know for sure what I'm working with. And then this is gonna be, I may need to get a second piece of this. Yeah, in fact, I'm definitely gonna have to get a second piece of this. Okay, hopefully that's in focus. Let's go ahead and start gluing down. First, we're going to glue down the mat. Actually, before I even do that, I'm going to go ahead and find the gap here where the spine meets the cover. Right there. That'll just help me center everything. here's what I have planned for the corners. These pieces right here. So I'm gonna die cut this twice out of this maroon cardstock. Sorry for the shaking of the camera. And this is what this tool is actually meant for. A lot of times I end up using it with double-sided tape to pull the release paper off. All right, to get these pieces glued down, I'm really gonna need a more detailed tip. So I'm gonna use a needle tip bottle, and this is Tombow Mono Aqua. For the hinges, we're gonna have 5 fins total, and each fin is gonna be 1/2 inch deep, and I want a 1/2 inch gusset. So to calculate how much paper I need for the hinges, the spine is 3 inches wide, so we're gonna start there, and then we're gonna add 1 inch for the 3 interior hinges, so that's 6 inches, and then 1/2 inch for each of the 2 hinges on the side, so that comes to 7 total inches. Hopefully that will work. This is 65-pound cardstock, because the 110-pound cardstock, it doesn't have enough give. It's a little too stiff to flip back and forth the way that we need it to as an album. So we're gonna cut this to 7 inches wide. Actually, you know what, I'm gonna start here, 7 inches. And then for the height, the base page is gonna be 6.5 inches tall. I don't want the hinges to be quite that tall, so we're gonna cut those to 6 1/4. Otherwise, you could end up with a bit of hinge sticking out the top or bottom, and that looks a little weird. Okay, now we're gonna flip this over and use this as a scoring tool. And I'm just gonna use this one. There's another one that comes with it, like way down here. Hard to see, right there. But I don't feel like digging it out. Okay, so apparently I hit the record button and it didn't start recording. Or I forgot to hit the record button, that's entirely possible. So we trimmed this down to 6 inches by 6 1/4 because the base page height is 6.5, and if we cut the spine, well, the binding piece to 6.5, we may end up with pages where part of the binding is sticking out above the page or below the page, and that just ends up looking weird. And then we scored at every 1/2 inch and folded at the first inch, or first 1/2 inch here. This is going to be fin number 1, and then gusset number 1, then folded the next 2 sections together to create fin number 2, and gusset number 2. The next 2 sections after that we folded together for fin number 3, skipped a section for gusset number 3, glued the next 2 sections together for fin number 4, left the next section for gusset number 4, and then folded up fin number 5. And I'm going to set this aside to dry. This is just liquid glue holding it together. I want to bring the cover of the interior of the album as close to the edge as possible. So I'm going to cut this piece to cover the spine on the interior. The album is 7 inches, so I'm going to cut this to 6 7/8. And then I'm going to mat the 2 covers with this piece. And again, I'm going to cut this to 6 7/8. By 7 1/8, because the album is 7 1/4 inches wide. And I want as much coverage as possible. I don't need to get this piece perfectly centered because it's just going to cover. It's just going to cover that spine piece there. I do want to use liquid glue because there is going to be a lot of weight on this. It's okay if we get glue coming out the side because that's going to get covered up. Mat is going to help hold these corners in place. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to get the corners put down first before matting the interior. So that we could use the adhesive for the interior matting to help keep everything locked down. And the last piece to add for the cover is going to be the binding. We're going to use a lot of glue here. We do not want this coming up. I'm just eyeballing the center here. I'm gonna have about 1/2 inch on either side and a little bit of room top to bottom. I'm gonna burnish each gusset down. All right. And I'm going to let this dry before I start flexing it. So we're going to set it aside for a sec and go ahead and cut the base pages for this project. The base usable area of this project is going to be 6.5 by 6.5, but because we've got 1/2 inch fins, we need to trim the paper to 6.5 by 7. And this trimmer can actually handle 2 pieces at a time, so I'm going to do that. Save a little bit of time. And we need a total of 10 of these. We're going to score all of these base pages along the 7-inch side. Is this the 7-inch side? That's the 7-inch side. We're going to score them at 1/2 inch. So this is 7 inches this way. I'm going to score these at 1/2 inch. See how we're doing with the glue here. All right, that looks like that's okay. So we're gonna go ahead and start slowly bending this up. And we're watching for gapping and bowing. Particularly right in here, the interior, that's where it tends to kind of bubble up and gap. We also don't want the paper to, you may need to go back in there and seal that down with a little more liquid glue. That's fine. I can do that with a needlepoint glue bottle. That's pretty good right there. We're going to repeat that on the other side and watch for gapping. It's starting to gap right there in the spine, so I'm going to grab this bottle right here and just insert a little more glue. Give that some time to dry. Oh, up here, I'm gonna go ahead and insert a little more glue in here. Next up, we will work on bin number 1.